Brilliant. Okay, so we've got Jay from Mindful Wealth with us today, and the subject is how to put your money where your heart is. So I shall hand over to you, Jay. Look forward to some useful advice.
Thanks, Mark. Good morning, everyone. Happy Mindful Monday. Can everyone see my screen?
Yes.
Perfect. I'm actually really glad that Shabari was a bit lost for words earlier. She's probably the strongest presenter, so it makes me feel a lot more at ease. I'm really excited to share some information with everyone. I've spent a long time making sure that all the slides were nice and pretty, but what I didn't do was didn't rehearse very much. So apologies if I do stumble over any words, but hopefully I won't do that. A lot of you know me and know what I do already, but what I really wanted to do was go into some more depth in terms of financials, options that are in place at the moment, and also answer some key questions as to my background and why I do what I do. It's not my dog, but thought I'd introduce sort of a lawyer type thing, because financial services presentation wouldn't be the same without a disclaimer. So just first things first, I wanted to make sure that the following isn't specific advice. Always worth speaking to someone to get specific advice tailored to your needs. Also, I know we get people from all over the world. A lot of the information, well, all of the information I'll go through today is based on UK laws and based on someone living, residing, domicile in the UK. So a little bit about my background. Picture on the left is a slightly younger, slightly more haired version of myself. I was actually in the fire brigade for 13 years, joined when I was 19, and I thought, right, this is me for life. I'm going to really make a difference. I'm going to really make an impact. And sadly, that's not the case. Very political. If anyone knows anyone that works for government, it's not great times at all. So my motivation really in my career is always to make a difference and to actually help people. And believe it or not, you don't really do much of that in fire brigade. So I started to look at different options and how to really impact people and how to really help them. So came across financial services quite a few years ago now. It was actually a company called Vitality that many of you must have heard about. They sort of fused wellness and keeping fit and healthy together with the finance side. So I trained up to do that. And it's just a natural progression, really, moving into the property side and then also looking at investments as well. So I've been doing this about 4.5 years altogether. And I can genuinely say that when I look after people, I get much more satisfaction than I ever did in the fire brigade. So yeah, really happy. It's my little dog, Ralph. So two of the questions I really want to highlight and address today. First of all is why? Why did I pick financial services? Why am I focused towards vegan and ethical investments? And also, how can an investment be vegan, be ethical? It's probably the last thing on your mind when you think about how to veganize things. So just a quick thing you can shout out or put it in the chat box. Mark, if you can read that out because I can't see it. But does anyone have an idea of how big the average pension pot is in the UK currently?
Lots of 100,000. Mitali says percentage or amount.
Amount, yeah, the size of an average pension. That's across everyone on average.
250,000.
I'm going to go for 1 million.
Okay.
Michael
Any
says
more for any more?
400,000. Michael
Where's
says
it?
400,000. Vitaly says 50k. Simone says 66k. They're coming thick and fast now. Sarah says 1.2 million.
Where's the accountant? David, what do you reckon?
Jabari also says 1 million.
I'm going to say it's quite low, to be honest. I'd probably say about 30 grand.
Okay, so a mixed bag, anything from 30 grand all the way up to 1 million. So the average pension pot is just over 61,000. So what that means in real money is the average amount that someone has to spend in retirement. It's around about £3,000 a year at the moment. Obviously, you've got state retirement, which, as we all know, that's people are getting older and older before you can claim that. By the time most of us can claim, we're probably going to be in our 70s, if at all. So that's the average private pension pot is paying about £3,000 per year. Can anyone guess how much money it costs to live what they call a moderate lifestyle? That's per year. How much do you think it would cost?
More than 3,000.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Something
Jane
like-
says
20,000.
28k. Vitaly says 35k.
Yes,
Jane says
32.
25. Beverly says 20. Jabari says 25. Sarah says 40.
Okay. Just over 20,000. And I would argue that anyone in the South, obviously that's just averaged out across the UK. So I'd argue that that figure is actually, as you said, Sam, much closer to 30,000. So we call that in the industry the pension gap. And so the reason for this is just to highlight the impact that we can have. The gap is huge. The amount that we need is far different from what we have. And that's the first reason why I decided to do this, because there's such a need to help people across the board. The other thing to mention as well is inflation. This diagram did include a pint of milk, but I very aggressively took that out because it's for obvious reasons. But yeah, that just these stats go to show how much things were 20 years ago and how things cost now. And inflation at the moment is massive. It's in the news. We've got, the base rate increasing, the rate at which a lot of us are borrowing money will increase as well. And inflation's really something to focus on. So what happens is people think that their savings are safe, and whilst the capital of your savings is safe, so if you've got £5,000 in a savings account, that's safe, but also there's a risk that inflation over time is going to erode that value of your money. So in 10, 20 years time, that £5,000 isn't going to be worth what it is today. So another opportunity to make sure that people really put their savings to work, make sure that they can keep up and hopefully beat inflation as well. I've got another little Q&A thing here. So I've got 3 options for you guys. So the question is, how much is currently invested in UK pensions? That's every single pension pot in the UK. So the 3 options are 27 million, 270 million, or 2.7 billion. So answers in the chat, or shout out what you think the answer is.
So I think the general view from everyone is 2.7 billion, which so far I'm not seeing anyone disagree with the 2.7 billion.
Okay.
I'm surprised it's only 2.7 billion. I thought you'd have a higher option.
Well, funny enough, Mark, you should say that, because it is actually 2.7 trillion. So a bit of a 2.7 trillion, which, if you want to even think about how that looks on paper, that's how many zeros is there. So to put that in perspective, the UK food industry, the latest stats that I've seen, is worth about 100 billion, and 1 trillion is 1,000 billions. So it's in terms of the scale, it's huge. The amount of money we have invested, and that's just in pensions. You've got other investments and other savings as well. So what I'm trying to get at with this is the impact that your money has, where people have their money invested, is an absolutely huge opportunity to really make impact and to really change things. Our biggest power, most of us, unless we're a high level influencer, I don't think we've got any political influencers here or any people majorly on TikTok or anything like that. But our biggest power is as a consumer, and that's why we see loads of lovely vegan food. More and more each year, there's more options. So yeah, by putting our money in the right place, we're really harnessing that power and that impact. Also, what I do with all of my clients, the first thing I ask them, this is the first thing on their questionnaire, is what's important to you? And I help then extend that impact, not only by helping people put their money in the right place, but also I make meaningful contributions to places like Veganuary, local animal sanctuaries, places like that. So yeah, I just think that's really, really important. Here's a stat from Make My Money Matter. And if you followed me on social media, you know that I'm quite heavily into Make My Money Matter. It's a movement that helps people make sense of their pensions and encourages people to go greener with their pensions. Now, I do have a problem with the word veggie. I'd like that to be vegan, but yeah, it just says is actually to put your money in the right place and to have a green pension is up to 21 times more powerful than all these things combined. Now, that's on an average, so obviously that's not to discount all of us vegans, but it's just to show how much of an impact we can have as an individual. So, second question to address, how can an investment be vegan? Because everyone that I speak to about this, probably the last thing they would think about. Before I go on to the next slide, we'll answer this. So obviously, the definition of being vegan is to cause as least harm as possible to animals. We don't live in a perfect world, but we have to make do with what we've got. So with investments, if you think about where your money is going, you're investing in a group of companies. So those companies can do good in the world and make a good impact, or they could be in very traditional, quite harmful industries. One of the main industries that is still going, unfortunately, hopefully, declining rapidly, is the meat and dairy industry. So the first way your investment can be vegan is obviously taking money from those industries and not putting your money there. Also, there's areas like animal testing. So there's a number of industries that may not be directly linked with animal agriculture, for example, but you might be investing in a company that does test on animals. Yeah, I think that covers that really. So in terms of going into more depth, I could speak about this for a couple of hours, but I'll try and keep it quite simple and straightforward. But this is kind of a scale of what can be done. So in the blue, we've got traditional investing, and that is literally the thought process behind that is how much, how's my investment performing? What's the return? And that's the only measurement really. And it means that there's no real ethics behind it. It's just based on numbers. And I would say probably 10, 15 years ago, that was the only option available and not much else probably around about the same time, there used to be quite a compromise between traditional investing and more ethical investing when that started to sort of rear its head. So the good news is now that when you look at all the metrics in terms of performance, that the ethical investments are actually doing as well or outperforming the traditional investments. So a big part of what I do is actually to educate people that there's no real compromise anymore. So if you're looking at this purely from a performance point of view, then it's a no-brainer. In the green, there's ethical investing, and ethical investing mainly is like a screening system. So you'd look to screen out, obviously all of us would look to screen out animal involvement as much as possible. But there's also things like fossil fuel. Again, that's the industry's been in the news a lot recently. Gambling's another one. Also tobacco, and even companies that aren't looking after their staff very well or aren't looking after their supply chain very well. It really encompasses a lot of different things. ESG investing, if you've probably heard of it, stands for environmental, social and governance. So as I mentioned, it's about looking into companies that actually look after not only their staff, their supply chain, make sure they're actually just looking after everything and making sure that they're taking a non-traditional approach. Impact investing is actually going a stage further, and that not only screens out the bad stuff, but it also invests, they call it a net positive return. So companies that actually have a positive impact on the planet, on people. So it's things like alternative fuels and energy, things like robotics, which you might not think is part of it, but robotics can help with a lot of healthcare, and it can help with reducing a lot of human suffering as well. So yeah, impact investing is really quite special, and we're seeing quite a lot of impact investing options now, which is fantastic. Also, this word called stewardship, which is referring to, sometimes it's easy to think of an all or nothing approach, and an approach where you think, well, I'm going to take my money out of this company because I don't agree with what they're doing. Whilst that's a good approach, there's also companies that may be sort of on the border, and we might identify that those companies can do better, and it's about positive encouragement. So it's about using our influence in that company to encourage better behaviours and make sure that they're actually improving. If you think about the vegan discussion, not many of us went vegan overnight. I pretty much did when I was away on holiday, but a lot of us, a lot of people that you speak to, you know, friends and family, it's all about that gentle encouragement. So that's another approach that we can take as well. So investment options currently, and as I say, there's nothing that's 100% perfect, but we're getting there, and we're getting so many more options for everyone, which is fantastic. You've got mutual societies, so places like Royal London and Vanguard, you may have heard of them. So mutual societies are ethical in their very nature because they don't have shareholders. So it's a bit like the cooperative bank. They're a bit like a co-op structure. And what that means is they don't have corporate interests. So whatever they do is for a mutual benefit for their shareholders, which are the members of, so with Royal London and Vanguard, for example, that those are, the members are the people that are investing in them. So they make hopefully better decisions. and more ethical decisions because they're not having to pay away private investors. Vanguard are also a platform, so that means that if you invest with Vanguard, you can see all of your investments in one place, and it's quite easy to monitor and measure things. We've then got ethical options, so just giving you a few options of companies that are trying to do things better. Within this space, there are some vegan, purely vegan options. The grey area, I guess, is around animal testing. And believe me, when I speak to all of these providers, which I do on a regular basis, I sound like a parrot because I'm always repeating the same thing. The grey area is around animal testing, and some of the providers' stance in terms of animal testing for healthcare and for oncology, such things like cancer treatment, is that they see that still as a net positive, and there's no alternatives at the moment. So obviously many of you would disagree with that, but there are certain options within all these three providers to actually veganize your investment. Also, we mentioned all different sizes of pension pots earlier and investment pots. Once you get to around about 200 or 250,000, which sounds like a big amount, but if you've been saving for 10, 12 years and you've got the right plan in place, that's not an unachievable amount. We can actually do what's called a bespoke investment solution. So I'm talking to a number of clients that they may be pre-vegan, they may be not vegan yet, but we're actually looking at specific, cherry picking specific things for them. So as a vegan, you can do that. So that's quite exciting. Other option is impact investment. So as I said, that's getting much more popular, and there's more options available for impact investing, which is fantastic. So yeah, it's on the scale really of shades of green. You've got the light green, which is maybe someone who wants to do better, but they may be more, because we've got to remember, right, that people are very traditional in their thinking. It takes them a long time to adapt to something new. So it might be that clients start off with a light green option. So that might be a more corporate provider, but their sort of sustainable range within that. So HSBC, for example. And the way I think about that is it's much better to start someone there, which is better than nothing, and then progress them across. And as we go along and review the situation, I can compare this with the better options, in my opinion, which is the darker green. The darker green are obviously the very, very ethical options. This is an impact investment report, and this is something that actually can be bespoke to clients according to how much money they've got in their pension or in their investment. So this is actually based on a client that's got 200,000, and it's obviously averaged across, but this goes into really, obviously animal welfare is close to all of our hearts, but the impact that can be created with a more ethical pension and investment goes way beyond that. We can see a lot of different avenues here, a lot of different impacts, a lot of help that we can provide. So this is quite readily available, and obviously it changes on a regular basis. But yeah, I probably talk really fast. I didn't rehearse that at all. So yeah, happy to go through anything else, double check anything with you. Just let me know if you've got any questions. Obviously, none of that specific advice. If you want to have a chat with me, you've got any specific questions, we can always have a discovery call after. And yeah, that's me. Thank you.
Brilliant. Thank you, Jay. That was really good. I think the pacing, from my perspective, the pacing was absolutely perfect, and I think that was the general view in the chat. Really informative. Some really interesting things to think about in there. And I think we're already getting flooded with questions. So let's see what we can do. So if I can read them as it moves. So Jane asked, if your money is tied up in a company pension, how do we make it ethical?
Very good question, Jane. I'll transfer the money to you later. So there's a few ways. I'll try and be as clear as I can, because there are a few caveats. If the pension is what's called a defined benefit pension, so it's the old final salary pensions, then the best advice is always to keep it where it is, because you've got guarantees there which you can never get with a private pension. Most of the time though, people, especially with the more recent pensions in the last few years, they won't be defined benefit. So there's a number of things you can do. Make My Money Matter has templates on their website, which you can actually go on and download and send to a company, and to say, I'm not happy with what I've got, I want more green options and more ethical options. So in general, you can encourage that behaviour. The other thing to consider as well is you can actually have a hybrid approach. So by that, I mean, it's always worth keeping a company pension going, because you've got not only your contributions, you've got the company paying in as well. So if you stop that and just did your own thing, you're already losing out. But depending on the scheme and depending on the rules, and obviously if it's the right thing, we don't know whether it's the right thing until we get, so I do a letter of authority to all of the current pension providers that a client has, and actually ask some really in-depth questions about protections and regulation. As long as that all checks out, we can actually do a bit of both. You can, let's say your pension is worth 20,000, you could leave a nominal amount in there, take out the rest, so you can still keep the pension going, and you can then invest that into a new thing. So that's basically if you're still within the company. If you're not within the company, you'll have what's called a paid up pension, which means that you've essentially got that pot in situ, and we can look at, if it's the right thing, transferring it over. So yeah, there's a few options there for you.
Excellent. Thank you, Jay. Hopefully that answers the question, Jane. Yeah, good. Right, okay, so Simone has asked, and I don't really even understand the question on this. Simone has asked, what are your thoughts on SSIP and SSAS pensions?
Yeah, so those two options are basically the different structures you can have within your pension. The self-administered scheme, which is SSAS, that's quite popular at the moment. Things seem to kind of trend in and out. It's a bit in depth to answer quickly, but basically they relate to the different structures. I think as a business owner, for me, the majority of the time, the best option is to have a self-invested pension. So it's called a SIP. It gives you greater flexibility. It means as a company owner, you can actually, if you do own a limited company, you can essentially have it as an expense. So it comes out just like any other business expense. You're not paying corporation tax or any taxes from there. But also fundamentally, if you do sell the business or wind the business down, wind it up, whatever one, that's your pension. So it's just an employee benefit, you being an employee. So I would say out of the two, there's only specific examples of that SAS, the self-administered scheme, that actually really makes sense. I can answer that in more detail, but yeah, that would be my opinion.
Thank you. That's helpful. I at least feel like I understand the question now, even if not fully the answer.
Glad I did.
Cool. Okay, so right, I'm just going down. So I've got a question from Michael. Do you know if Claire Smith at Beyond Animal has a pension fund? I assume that's for general availability, Michael, not whether she's personally got a pension.
So for those of you that don't know Claire, she is she's fantastic. She's based. She's not based in the UK. I think it's South Africa.
It's Switzerland. She's in Switzerland.
Switzerland. Okay, got the first letter right. She is very, very passionate about making sure that investments are vegan. I've talked to her in depth a couple of times, as well as Lee. So Lee works with Claire, and yeah, Beyond Investing is mainly based offshore. So they have options, but they don't have options for anyone that is in the UK. The other thing to consider as well with investing is got to try and get that balance between making sure an investment's not traditional and making sure that it has impact and it has meaning and it's aligned to your values, but also that the investment is diversified enough. So a lot of sort of goes into, if you're on like Seedrs or any startup platforms, it's great seeing these new companies coming through, but there is a big risk to newer companies. And if you haven't got enough options within that portfolio, so to give you an idea, if we went with a Royal London pension, that might have 800 companies within your pension. So Claire at Beyond Animal is doing some great stuff, and I'm hoping we can work with her in future. But at the moment, it doesn't quite work from a risk point of view. But I am speaking with another provider, and that was I've got a number of people speak to me actually about her, but including Matt O'Hara as well, and she is actually looking at a pure vegan investment rather than trying to piece things together. And I'm in talks with her around the conversation of animal testing, making sure it's not watered down at all, that no animal testing means no animal testing regardless of the industry and stuff like that. So there's hopefully that option for us too as well soon.
Excellent. Okay, thank you, Jay. That's really helpful. I've got one last question here from Lena saying, have you heard of Smart Pension and how green is it?
I have heard of Smart Pension. Funny enough, again, I'll transfer you the money as well, Lena, later. One of my clients is with Smart Pension, and just like I was mentioning about speaking to them in terms of taking money out and keeping the scheme going, I wasn't able to do that for the client because she didn't have enough in there. Smart Pension is part of Make My Money Matter. They're a good sort of, I guess, a good off-the-shelf option. Ethically, it looks okay. But what Smart Pension doesn't do, which a lot of work pensions don't do, because they're so cheap, they don't really look at the person's risk profile. So I haven't really mentioned that a lot today, but people, everyone will have their own attitude to risk and your own opinions, but also your own capacity to risk. You might have other things elsewhere. You might have properties. You might have, everyone's in a different financial situation. So what a risk profile will do, and I work on a scale of 1 to 10. So there's investments all the way between 1, which I've never seen someone that's at a 1 that's very risk averse, all the way up to 10. Again, I've never seen someone at a 10. Usually either a 4 or 5 or 6 or 7 or 8. That helps align the investments with the risk. So what Smart Pensions doesn't do is have a very good, or most workplace pensions don't do, unfortunately, is they only really have 3 options. They have not sort of low risk, medium risk, or high risk. So yeah, but it's better than nothing. So if you're with Smart Pension and you've got I think it's less than £10,000, you can't transfer the money out anyway without closing it all together. So yeah, quick answer, it's better than nothing, but there are better options.
Thank you, Jay. I'm definitely gonna have to speak with you in more detail because yeah, that's kind of like my new company's pension scheme, or like, let's say, yeah, that what they use. And I was just curious, to be very honest, because otherwise I'm with Egon. So I seen that you had it on your slide.
Oh, with Aegon, yeah. Aegon have actually got I think they call it accidentally vegan option for sure. The one thing to mention as well, any workplace pensions that anyone has, the default pension is probably not going to be the ethical one. So you can, as an employee, speak to a pension provider directly and say, what ethical options have you got? And then switch over to that one if that's the right thing for you. But I'm happy to, the letter of authority process is an official process which is regulated and everything else, but I'm happy to help anyone, if they've got any statements or anything that they need, help with unofficially, just to help get your heads around it, really. Happy to help anyone on that basis. Or speak to your work as well. I speak to a lot of employers now. I'm finding LinkedIn, actually partially with help from this group on LinkedIn, it's starting to get really, it's starting to attract a lot of businesses that are maybe not 100% vegan, but they're trying to do the right thing. So yeah, it's great.
Brilliant. Excellent. Thank you very much for that, Jay. I'm going to wrap up the recording now because we're pretty close to time, but that was a really great talk and some really good answers to questions at the end as well. So thank you again for that.